This event took place about 5 years ago, back during the spring break of my junior year in college. My three closest friends, Jordan, Emily, Marcus, and I, decided to head out to Colorado for a car camping trip. We had been doing trips like this since we were freshmen, but that specific semester, we were all struggling financially. Because of that, we opted for dispersed camping instead of paying fees for an official campground. I was the one who found the location. I used one of those camping apps that lists free sites on public land. The spot was located just outside of Buena Vista, hidden way back down a long, winding Forest Service road that felt like it led to the edge of the world. We were experienced. The four of us had done enough camping to know the ropes. We arrived in the late afternoon and discovered a clearing next to what looked like an ancient, dried-up creek bed. The water was gone, but the path that had carved through the earth remained. It was isolated, completely dead silent. No other campers, no tire tracks, nothing. It was exactly the kind of solitude we were looking for. We set up our tents in a loose, casual cluster, roughly 15 feet apart from one another. There was no real system to it. We just pitched them wherever the ground was flat enough and free of sharp rocks. I don't recall much of that evening. We likely drank a few beers, played some cards, and just enjoyed being away from campus. Exhausted from the long drive, we all called it a night around 11 p.m. and retreated to our separate tents. Here is where things get strange. I remember falling into an incredibly deep sleep. Usually, I'm a very light sleeper, especially when I'm not in my own bed. Even in a climate-controlled room, I wake up multiple times. But out here, on the hard ground, I felt like I had been sedated. It wasn't normal sleep. It was like I had been turned off. When I woke up the next morning, the silence was deafening. I unzipped my tent fly to let in the morning air, and my brain just stopped working. I froze. All four of our tents had been moved. They weren't just ruffled by the wind or an animal. They had been physically relocated. We were now arranged in a perfect mathematical square, and in the center, exactly equidistant from each tent, was a pile of 4 stones balanced on top of each other. That rock formation had definitely not been there when we went to sleep. I felt like I was still dreaming. It was too precise to be real. Each tent had been moved about 20 or 30 feet from our original spots, but the most terrifying part was that the stakes were still driven perfectly into the ground. Nothing inside my tent had tipped over. My phone was still plugged into the portable charger. My water bottle was standing up. I checked my gear frantically. Nothing was missing. I screamed for my friends to wake up. Jordan came out first, and the look of sheer confusion on his face mirrored my own. Then came Emily and Marcus. We all stood there staring at this impossible geometry. None of us had heard a thing. But then Emily spoke up. She said, "That's so weird. I had this incredibly vivid dream last night. I was walking in a line through a desert, and someone was counting my steps out loud." Jordan's face went pale. He whispered, "I had a dream I was marching in the army, staying in perfect step with soldiers." Marcus and I didn't remember our dreams, but the fact that Emily and Jordan had shared such similar hallucinations about marching and order was deeply unsettling. The vibe in that clearing shifted instantly. It felt like we were all connected telepathically, but perhaps in a sickening way. It felt like a fifth person was there with us, watching us, or perhaps playing us like toy soldiers. We investigated the ground and found the proof. Drag marks, deep grooves in the dirt led from our original spots towards our new locations, but the drag marks stopped about 10 feet short of where the tents actually sat. It was as if whoever or whatever did this dragged us part of the way and then lifted the tents with us inside to place us gently in that perfect square. Jordan walked towards the center to look at the stones. There were exactly 4 of them, stacked like a sculpture. As he leaned in, he lost his footing and accidentally knocked the pile over. The stones tumbled to the dirt with a dull thud. The reaction was immediate. From the distance, a sound erupted. It wasn't an animal roar. It was a low, grinding rumble, like 2 massive tectonic plates scraping together, or a heavy stone door being pushed open deep underground. That sound triggered a primal panic in all of us. We didn't even discuss it. We just started tearing down the campsite.
I could feel my friends' terror radiating off them, and I know they could feel mine. We packed up in under 5 minutes, a process that usually takes 30. We threw everything into the car and sped out of there. We never saw who did it. We never saw anyone else on that road. It's been 5 years, and we've all moved to different cities now, but we never talk about that night. I try not to think about it too much. I'm afraid that if I focus on it, that grinding sound will come back.
My name is Ryan. This incident happened last summer when I was 23. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I had been planning a camping trip to the Uwharrie National Forest in North Carolina for months. We had been together for about a year and a half, and things were getting a bit stale, just routine. We thought a weekend with no cell service would help us reconnect. I spent weeks researching online and found a campground about 3 miles down a rough Forest Service road. It was described as small, maybe 6 or 7 sites, and very spread out. When we arrived on Friday, just before sunset, I was happy with the choice. It was secluded. There was only one other vehicle, a blue sedan parked at a site somewhat near ours, but I couldn't see anyone around it. Sarah picked a spot at the far end of the road where it dead-ended into the dense woods. We set up camp, got a fire going, and for a while, it was perfect. We were drinking beer, watching the flames, and just existing together. Around 10 p.m., Sarah went to brush her teeth near the picnic tables. I was poking the fire with a stick when I suddenly realized someone was standing right at the edge of the firelight. I jumped. I hadn't heard a single footstep. "Sorry to startle you," the man said. He introduced himself as Caleb. He looked to be about 30. He had this intense, unblinking stare that made my skin crawl. He said he was camped in the blue sedan and just wanted to say hello. When Sarah walked back, Caleb's demeanor changed. He completely ignored me and focused entirely on Sarah. He told her she picked a good, secluded spot. He kept rambling about how he was there to get away from people, which was ironic since he was currently invading our campsite. It was awkward and creepy. Eventually, I lied and said we needed to sleep because we had an early hike. He left, walking back into the pitch-black darkness without a flashlight. We went to bed, trying to brush it off. But that night, I woke up abruptly. It was around 3 a.m. I heard voices, distinctly. It sounded like 2 people having a conversation just a few yards from our tent. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the door, expecting to catch Caleb creeping around. Silence. The voices stopped the second I moved. I shone my light everywhere, but the woods were empty. I told myself it was just other campers further away and went back to sleep. The next day, we went hiking and tried to enjoy ourselves, but when we returned to our site as the sun was beginning to set, things escalated. I went to my truck to get firewood and noticed something white fluttering under my windshield wiper. It was a napkin. I unfolded it. Written in shaky handwriting were the words, "You should move your tent." I showed Sarah and she immediately panicked. She said, "It's Caleb, it has to be." As we were standing there debating what to do, Caleb walked up to us. He was wearing the same clothes as the day before. I was furious. I held up the note and was about to yell at him, but he held up his hands in a defensive gesture. He looked terrified. "I didn't want to freak you out," he said, his voice trembling, "but weird stuff happens out here. I found abandoned campsites deep in the woods today. Clothes, gear, just left behind." Then he dropped a bombshell. He said, "I heard people walking around my car last night. I'm cutting my trip short. I'm leaving right now, and if I were you, I'd do the same." He sounded so genuine that my anger turned to confusion. He turned around and walked back to his blue sedan. Sarah and I looked at each other and decided we weren't taking any chances. We started packing frantically. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees. Sarah's hands were shaking so bad she kept dropping things. We threw everything into the back of my truck and I started the engine. As we drove down the dirt road toward the exit, we passed Caleb's campsite. His blue sedan was still there. Caleb was crouched down by the rear tire. I stopped the truck. "What's wrong?" I asked. He stepped back. His tire was shredded. There was a massive gash in the rubber. It had clearly been slashed with a knife. "Can you give me a lift?" Caleb asked. Sarah squeezed my arm hard. "No," she whispered. "Ryan, do not let him in." I looked at the slashed tire, then at Caleb. I felt guilty, but my gut was screaming at me. "I can't," I said, "but I'll call the police as soon as I get a signal." I hit the gas and pulled away. Caleb just stood there, watching us leave. We were maybe 100 yards down the road, headlights cutting through the darkness, when I saw them. To my right, standing in the tree line, were 3 figures. They weren't moving, they weren't hiding, they were just standing there, staring at the road, waiting. I slammed on the brakes instinctively. "Drive!" Sarah screamed. "Ryan, drive!" I floored it. We didn't speak until we hit the main highway. I called 911 and reported Caleb's situation. They said they'd send a ranger. We never heard back. To this day, I don't know if Caleb was a victim like us or if he was part of the trap, the bait to get us to stop while his friends waited in the woods. This happened just 2 days ago. I'm still processing it. My name is Ethan, a 28-year-old IT consultant living in Bozeman, Montana. Recently, I went through a divorce that left me feeling completely broken. I needed to reset my brain. I've been a scout my whole life, so I decided to do a solo trip into the deep backcountry of the Helena, Lewis, and Clark National Forest. I didn't want to see a single soul. I found coordinates on an obscure forum for a spot way off the grid. It took 4 hours to drive there, and the last hour was an overgrown trail that scratched the hell out of my truck. When the trail became impassable, I parked and hiked the rest of the way. I found the clearing from the forum post, but it wasn't empty. There was a tent there, an old olive green canvas tent that looked like it was from the 1980s. It was covered with thick, fuzzy mold. It looked like it had been standing there for years. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I walked over. The smell hit me about 10 feet away, a sweet, rotting stench like dead meat. The zipper was half open. I used a stick to push the flap aside. Inside, there was no body, which was a relief. Just a filthy sleeping bag, some rusted soup cans, and a small water-damaged notebook. I held my breath and grabbed the notebook. I flipped through the pages. It was insane. It was filled with tally marks, just rows and rows of lines. Every single page, they were organized in groups of 7. The last page had 42 groups. Someone had been counting something for over 8 months. I took the notebook. I don't know why, I just did. I set up my own camp on the far side of the clearing, keeping a nervous eye on that rotting tent. I didn't see any other signs of life. No fresh fire pits, no footprints. That night, the sky was clear and full of stars. I fell asleep quickly, but I woke up in the pitch black. I didn't know what time it was, but I knew I wasn't alone. I lay perfectly still. Then I heard it, whispering. It sounded like 3 different voices, rapid and hushed, arguing about something. They were maybe 20 feet from my tent. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they could hear it. Then the footsteps started. I could hear heavy boots crunching on the dry pine needles, circling my tent. My hand drifted to my rifle, a Remington 700 I brought for bears. Suddenly, the side of my tent caved in slightly, like someone had poked it. Then again, and then the zipper on my door jiggled. I had clipped the zippers together from the inside, so it didn't open. The person outside got frustrated. They started scratching at the canvas, fast, frantic scratching, like a dog trying to dig through a door. I couldn't take it anymore. I racked the bolt of my rifle, a loud metallic clack-clack that echoes. "I have a gun!" I shouted. "Back the F off!" The scratching stopped instantly. There was a second of silence, and then chaos. I heard footsteps sprinting away, but not in one direction. It sounded like 3 or 4 people running off in different directions into the woods. I sat there with my rifle pointed at the door until the sun came up. When morning finally broke, I burst out of my tent, ready to fight. I looked across the clearing. The moldy green tent was gone. It had vanished. I walked over to where it had been. The grass wasn't flattened, no stake holes. It was like it had never existed. But I had the notebook in my pocket. I knew it was real. I looked down at the mud around my tent. It was covered in footprints, bare human footprints, dozens of them. And then I looked at the big pine tree next to my site. Fresh cuts in the bark, tally marks, 7 groups of 7, and the start of an 8th. And hanging from a branch right above those marks was a dead squirrel tied up with fishing line. I didn't pack my gear. I threw it. I tossed everything into my truck bed in a pile and reversed down that trail faster than I should have. I don't know what those tally marks meant. I don't know if they were counting days or victims, but I know that the count started again the night I arrived.